Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give folks a few minutes as they are making their way into the virtual Zoom here with us this afternoon. And we'll get started in just a minute. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Felicity Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Policy Center. We're really glad to have you with us for today's State Policy Action Call. For those who have joined us before, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we host these calls every month to bring people together from across the Commonwealth to learn about how the policies shaping our state, and just as importantly, how we can take action together to move those policies forward. Today's conversation is especially timely. We're in the middle of budget season here in Pennsylvania. Decisions will be made over the next several months that will shape whether our state has the resources to invest in our schools, our healthcare system, our transit, our families, and our communities. And at the center of that conversation is a fundamental question. Do we have the resources we need, or are we choosing not to require that everyone pays their fair share? Because the reality is, Pennsylvania is not a poor state, but it is one of the worst states to be poor in. We are leaving billions of dollars on the table every year by failing to ask the wealthiest Pennsylvanians and large corporations to contribute their fair share. From our research, we're leaving up to $4.9 billion annually, just from the wealthiest households alone, not even accounting for corporate tax loopholes for multinational corporations that continue to drain resources from our state. At the same time, we're seeing the number of multimillionaires and billionaires in Pennsylvania continue to grow. Recent reporting has shown that our billionaire class is expanding, even as working families are struggling to keep up with rising costs. This is what we mean when we talk about untapped wealth. We have more wealth in this state than ever before, but it's not being taxed fairly or invested in the people and communities that make our economy run. And that's why today's conversation is so important, because we're not starting from scratch. We have already seen what progress looks like. The Working Pennsylvanians tax credit is a real meaningful step forward. It was passed in last year's budget and included again in the governor's proposal this year. And for the first time, working people in Pennsylvania will be able to receive up to $805 back, even if they owe little to no state income tax. That matters. It's a recognition that our tax system has been upside down for far too long, and that we need to rebalance it to support the people who are working every day to power our economy. But we also know that this is just a first step. Other states are going further. They are matching higher percentages of the federal earned income tax credit, putting more money back in the pockets of working families. They're building tax systems that are more equitable and more sustainable. And importantly, they're proving something that we should not lose sight of in this conversation. A strong economy depends on strong communities and a workforce that has what it needs to thrive. That means good schools, reliable infrastructure and transit, access to affordable healthcare and childcare, and a tax system that does not ask the most from those with the least. So when we talk about tax fairness, we're not talking about discouraging growth. We're talking about creating the conditions for long-term sustainable growth by making sure we have the revenue to invest in what actually drives economic success. That is the conversation we're building through our For Our Commonwealth campaign, and that is what today's call is about. We have a fantastic group of speakers with us who are working on this from multiple angles. They will talk about both the progress we've made, including that Working Pennsylvanians tax credit, and the work ahead, including proposals like the fair share tax and other policies to make our system more equitable. I want to thank all of our speakers for being here with us today. We are really grateful for your leadership and for your partnership in this work. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. All attendee lines are muted to minimize background noise. However, we want this to be interactive, so please drop your questions into the Zoom chat at any point during the conversation. When we move into the Q&A portion, our moderator, Jeff Garris here, will pose as many of those questions to our panelists as time allows. If you're having any technical issues, please send a message in the chat and our team will assist. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my team member, Jeff, who will introduce our panelists and get us started with a short video highlighting the Working Pennsylvanians tax credit. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you so much, Felicity. We're really glad to have folks here today, and we've got a wonderful lineup of speakers. You know, often when we talk about the issue of tax justice and tax fairness, we're talking about things that we want to accomplish. I'm pleased to say that we have some things to celebrate today, and that's going to be the way that we start off, talking about a really exciting new way to help working Pennsylvanians keep more money in their pockets that they can spend in local businesses and stimulate the local economy. We are really pleased about the opportunity for folks this year when they file their income taxes, and I am noticing the deadline is approaching and I've got to get started on mine, but we want to make sure that everyone knows about what's called the Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit. So my colleague Adrian Sandley is going to pop up here a very short 90-second video from the Senate Democratic Caucus explaining a little bit about this wonderful tax program.
Great news, Pennsylvania! The Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit is now live. On November 12th, Governor Shapiro signed into law the 2025-26 Pennsylvania budget, which included the creation of the Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit. This $193 million program offers a state tax credit worth 10% of the federal Earned Income Tax Credit and will benefit nearly 1 million Pennsylvanians this coming tax season. If you qualify for the federal Earned Income Tax Credit, you automatically qualify for the Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit. The easiest way to claim the credit is to file your federal and state tax returns online at the same time. The Shapiro administration has made it easy to determine whether you qualify and how much money is going back into your pocket with a new online Working Pennsylvania Tax Credit calculator developed in partnership with Code PA and the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. Simply input your filing status, number of dependents, and annual income, and the calculator will tell you how much money you can expect in tax credits from this year. The Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit is the 7th tax cut that the Shapiro administration has overseen, building on his expansion of the Property Tax and Rent Rebate Program, the Employer Child Care Contribution Tax Credit, and allowing a student loan interest deduction, among other programs that Senate Democrats have supported to make sure working Pennsylvanians can keep more of their hard-earned money in their wallets. For more information on this program and how Senate Democrats delivered big wins for affordability in this year's budget, you can visit pasenate.com/WPTC. If you have questions or need additional support, you can submit a question to the Department of Revenue in person, by phone, or online.
Thanks so much for sharing that video. Adrian really makes the case for some progress in the area of tax justice and tax fairness and making sure that working people are not paying more than is fair for them to be paying. We're going to be talking today about one of the problems we have in Pennsylvania, which is an upside-down tax system that takes more from the people with the least and gives the wealthiest billionaires and corporations tax breaks that take money away from our schools, from housing, from healthcare, and the other priorities that matter so much to us in Pennsylvania. We're really pleased to have some wonderful panelists to join us today to talk a little bit about how the victory was won for the Working Pennsylvanians Tax Credit, but more importantly, about some of the other important initiatives that we could enact here in Pennsylvania through our General Assembly and the Governor's Office that would help to make Pennsylvania more affordable for working people and to make sure that the super rich and billionaires pay their fair share. I'm going to introduce our speakers. We will be introducing them in the order that they will be speaking. And so between each of the speakers, we will not be doing any additional introductions. So when our speaker concludes, please let us know and we'll move on then to the next speaker. We have quite a lineup today, as I mentioned. We're really pleased to have with us here as our first speaker, our representative from the Lancaster County area from House District 49, Representative Izzy Smith-Waddell. Following Representative Izzy, we're going to be hearing from Erin Serre, who is the policy director for Senator Art Haywood. He represents the 4th Senatorial District with parts of Philadelphia and Montgomery County. Following Erin, we will hear from Ryan Matthews, our colleague at For Our Future, where he is the state director for their efforts here. We're going to hear about some of the ways that For Our Future is mobilizing people for tax fairness. And then we'll conclude with Jess Brittain, who is the organizing director with our friends at Action Together Northeast PA, coming to us, of course, from Northeast PA. Glad to have all of our speakers here. Again, as Felicity mentioned, if you have any questions for our speakers, please drop those questions in the chat. I will be fielding as many of those as I can. And then we'll be talking a bit about some ways that you can take action right now to help in this movement for tax fairness. On that note, let me turn it over to you, Rep. Izzy.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. State Rep Izzy Smith-Waddell here. First off, let me say thank you for welcoming me, and thank you for taking the time to hear about how Pennsylvania, this incredibly person-rich, resource-rich Commonwealth that has been part of the fabric of our nation from the very beginning, can model justice in its tax and economic policies. So let's talk first about the working people's, the working families tax credit, which is something that we were really excited to get out of last year's budget and are pleased to be continuing to fight for in this and future budget. So what we're doing is, as you well know, we're mirroring some of those federal earned income tax credits, making sure that you are getting at least a portion of what you're getting back from the feds, back from the Commonwealth as well. That's putting more money directly in the pockets of working Pennsylvanians, particularly those folks who are taking care of dependents, trying to raise families here in the Commonwealth. As much as $805, pardon me, which I think for a lot of folks, the immediate response is they should be getting more back, and we agree. But also, this is an opportunity to give folks a few $100s more to work with. And we think that that's important, especially building on our work, pardon me, with the property tax rent rebate program. But part of the reason that we have to have a property tax rent rebate program, part of the reason that we have this tax credit, which again, we're very proud to have delivered, is because the Commonwealth tax system is so backwards. So because of something in the Pennsylvania Constitution called the Uniformity Clause, which presumes that all taxes must be flat within a class, pardon me, and which the courts have historically determined to mean that there can be no progressive taxation. We're left in this position where you and I and your neighbor up the street who can't afford groceries are paying the same rate of tax as Jeffrey Yass, the Commonwealth's richest man. And I think we can kind of on its face say that that is both unreasonable and unjust, but it is this, pardon me, it is this tax system that we've been working in with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as long as we've had the Commonwealth. And it creates these problems where we have, for example, we know that our people need more health care. We're investing in housing, which is my passion area, at approximately 1%, I would argue, the rate of housing investment that we need. I'm very proud of what we've done, but, maybe we need 200,000 more affordable homes. We have Pennsylvania being kicked off of Medicare. We have folks losing their SNAP. And perhaps most significantly, we have a Commonwealth Court decision that says we need to be funding schools to a certain level. And every year we come back into the building and say, oh, we don't know how we're going to pay for getting to, pardon me, getting to the $5 billion a year that we owe the Commonwealth's young people. But the truth is, the answer is right in front of us. This is not a resource poor state. There are billions of dollars in wealth being generated here in the Commonwealth every year. Some of it's being offshored, some of it's being hidden. But however you slice it, what it comes down to is that the wealthiest Pennsylvanians aren't paying their fair share. And so the fair share tax plan, as seen in HB 1773 of 23-24, would really simply say, we're going to tax the way that most Pennsylvanians earn income that they use to pay for their basic living at one rate, and we're going to tax that passive income, that interest, royalties, rent, patents, what have you, where folks are making money your money while just sitting and not working for it, that's going to be taxed at a higher rate. And that's because, one, that's the way we're going to make it work here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And because two, all of those things are possible. Those passive income profits are possible because of the labor of working Pennsylvanians who are overtaxed to pay for schools. They're overtaxed to pay into Medicare, which supports hospitals, which are closing all across rural Pennsylvania. And so we've got a couple of options that are available to us in terms of percentages. But what we know is either way that we take it, we're probably standing to see at least $6 billion in new revenue year over year here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which makes a lot of things possible. And we can do that without asking working families, folks struggling to get by, to pay more. That is the core idea of the work that we're doing. And we're seeing all across the United States of America more and more legislatures and governors getting on board with the fact that we don't have a system that works for working people. And the only thing that's going to work is making sure that these wealths and these assets, these corporate taxes, which are being sent off to Delaware to be charged 0% on, that those resources come back to the birthplace of American liberty right here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We've been thrilled to be part of a large and growing movement of legislators who are pushing this forward. And we feel really soon that it's going to move from something that we're talking about right here to something that we are talking about when we are negotiating the budget for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in this and future years, which is possible because we are part of a large coalition of reps, senators, stakeholder groups, and other organizers. And I just want to close by saying, like, that is how this is going to happen. Please take every opportunity. If you encounter your state rep, your state senator, tell them that you want the fair share tax plan in the Commonwealth. And when you encounter your township supervisors, city council, school board members, when they tell you, hey, we have to raise taxes again this year, say to them, that would not be the case if you joined us in building the largest possible coalition for a fair system of taxation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm here and happy to answer more questions as we go on. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Erin Serre. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as policy director for State Senator Art Haywood. So as Jeff mentioned, Senator Haywood represents parts of Montgomery and Philadelphia counties and has proudly worked alongside Penn Policy Center for a number of years to advance tax justice. So I'm thrilled to be here today on his behalf to talk about the Fair Share Tax Plan. I'm especially honored to be preceded by Rep. Izzy, who has been a tremendous friend and ally to our office and the entire Senate Democratic Caucus. So thank you so much, Rep. Izzy. I'm also excited to share that our office will be introducing fair share tax legislation in the coming days, so please stay tuned for a bill number. So everyone on this call knows that Pennsylvanians value hard work. If we can please advance to the second slide there, please. Thank you so much. We know that we value hard work here in Pennsylvania, but unfortunately, as the rep alluded to, our tax code does not reflect that value. Under our current system, we tax work too much and wealth too little. And I love this map. It shows so clearly that Pennsylvania has one of, if not the most regressive tax structures in the nation. So this means that a custodian or a cashier often pays a higher percentage of their income in state and local taxes than, say, their ultra wealthy businessman neighbor down the block. So again, I want to be clear about why I love this graphic so much. It makes it very clear that Pennsylvania has got it bad when it comes to tax fairness. We talk a lot about the national economy and how overall that might be a little bit more volatile than a lot of us would like to see right now. But the fact of the matter is that Pennsylvania has a lot of work to do here at home as well. So if this makes you angry, and based on the reactions I'm seeing in the chat, it seems to make some of you angry, you are not alone. Pennsylvania's tax system is definitely stacked against us, and thankfully, the Fair Share Tax Plan is a common sense solution that we'll be talking about here today. Next slide, please. So, what is the fair share tax? Well, it's a simple two-part rebalancing of our existing personal income tax structure. So, currently, Pennsylvania taxes all forms of income at a flat 3.07%. Now, whether that money comes from a hard-earned paycheck or from selling stocks, the rate is the same. And whether your family makes $50,000 a year or $5 million per year, you're paying that same 3.07% in taxes. Now, I have to give a shout out to the folks over at Penn Policy Center for letting me steal this slide because, again, I think it demonstrates the issue so clearly. The bottom 20% of households in Pennsylvania pay 15.1% of their income in state and local taxes. And meanwhile, the top 1% are only paying 6%, which is just absurd. So the fair share tax would actually divide our existing structure into two categories. So instead of having one personal income tax, we would focus on income from work as being distinct and separate from income from wealth. So first, we lower the tax rate on working families. We propose actually cutting that 3.07% tax rate on wages and interest, which is what you earn from a hardworking job, down from the current 3.07% to 2.8%. Second, we ask the ultra wealthy to pay their fair share, which means we would increase the tax rate on passive income, things like capital gains, dividends, and royalties, to 6.5%. But what does that look like in real dollars? I know I'm talking a lot about percentages here. For the vast majority of Pennsylvanians, this plan would actually result in a tax cut or a neutral outcome. So if you live primarily off your salary, you would see more money in your paycheck every single week. And more than 54% of new revenue from the fair share tax would come from the top 1% of taxpayers. So as you can see, for the average Pennsylvanian who does not have access to the capital and tools of the ultra wealthy, the fair share tax plan would be a game changer. Next slide, please. Before we wrap up, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and thankfully, Rep. Izzy already mentioned this, so it's not ripping the Band-Aid off as much, but we do have the issue of the uniformity clause. For those unfamiliar, again, the uniformity clause mandates that all taxes be uniform across the same class of subjects. We believe very strongly that our legislation does comply with the uniformity clause. It still imposes the same flat tax rate within each of the classes of income. We believe this meets the test of the 1981 Supreme Court case, Aldine Apartments, Inc. versus Commonwealth. I must admit that I'm not an attorney, so please don't ask me for legal advice. But again, as Rep. Izzy said, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. That being said, our office has gone so far to introduce separate legislation that would eliminate the uniformity clause from Pennsylvania's Constitution entirely. But for those of you that are familiar with the constitutional amendment process, that can take years. And in our view, Pennsylvania can't really wait that long. There's a lot of hesitancy among folks to crack open our tax code, as the reforms we're proposing would be quite transformative. But that's exactly the point. We really need to make a bold change. Next slide, please. So the bottom line is that Pennsylvania can meet its budget needs without asking working and middle-class families to pay more in taxes or to give up critical government programs like SNAP and Medicaid. This plan isn't just about fairness in the abstract, it's about affordability. We know that families are struggling with the costs of housing, energy, and groceries. So by shifting the burden off of labor and onto the growth of accumulated wealth, we could put hundreds of millions of dollars back in the pockets of working Pennsylvanians. The fair share tax offers a practical, sustainable, long-term path forward. It respects the dignity of work, it provides relief to the middle class, and it ensures those who have benefited the most from our economy are contributing their fair share to its future. In closing, I would like to thank Penn Policy Center for having me and thank you all for your dedication to achieving tax justice for all. We need to turn our tax code right side up and build a Pennsylvania that works for everyone. Thank you. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Ryan.
Thanks very much, Erin. And thank you to Jeff and everybody at Penn Policy Center for inviting me to participate in today's call. This is a really excellent opportunity. I've already learned multiple things. My name is Ryan Matthews. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Pennsylvania State Director for Our Future. For Our Future is an advocacy organization. We are a 501c3, a 501c4, and a political action committee. And what we do is create a year-round organizing presence in multiple states, of which Pennsylvania is one, where we encourage folks, working families to organize to create a better way of living for themselves and their neighbors, particularly in battleground states. And we work to build the capacity to have those conversations with voters year-round. And we have the advantage of being an organization that cares about multiple issue areas at once. So we work to organize for a strong public education, for an economy that works for everybody, especially one that respects the rights of workers to collectively bargain and to form unions. We also advocate for social and racial justice, and we advocate for organizing to fight back against the effects of climate change. All of these are issues that when we are out on the doors and we're talking to voters, that is what we find are the issues that working families care most about and that actually affect their lived experience and their day-to-day lives in the realest sense. One of the reasons why this is a big reason why we are a supporter of tax fairness and a lot of the of fixing a lot of the problems that Erin and Rep. Izzy raised. And that is because, when you're a single issue organization, or somebody who is advocating for a very specific policy fix, whatever your policy fix is, it can be easy to say, hey, here's my bill that I support. This is the solution to our problem, and it would only cost X amount of money. But when you start looking at the broad spectrum of issues that are affecting working families in Pennsylvania, we start to see that the actions that all really need to be taken in step with one another. We need to provide an economy and jobs that are accessible and provide a living wage for most families. We need to provide an education system that is going to equip our children to become the next generation, the next workforce that's going to fuel our state. And we also need to spend money combating climate change and its effects, and also the effects of discrimination and policies that are harmful to social and racial justice. Well, once we look at all of those things, we start to see that we can't just fix some of these problems with a little nip and tuck here, or a little tax credit here, or a simple change to the budget there. We need whole-scale change in the way that we think about taxing people, how we pay for the solutions that we need. But then also one of the things that we find as an organization that cares about state issues and federal issues is that a lot of the problems that were just laid out for us are ones that a lot of folks aren't aware about. People understand that there is a progressive gradation in taxes at the federal level, and that is the one that we find whenever we're talking to people at the doors about taxes. 99% of the time they are talking about federal taxes and probably aren't even really aware of, or if they are aware of it, not thinking about the fact that there are different systems at the state and federal level and that they are equitable in different ways, and inequitable more often than not in different ways. Um, so we're very proud as an organization to work with partners with the organizations that are represented here today because of exactly this interconnectedness and the complexity of these issues. Most of the things that I learned today that I will continue to learn are things that we can be pretty confident most of our voters do not understand. Uh, but the values that we are rooting our work in, most effectively one of fairness and equality, are ones we know resonate really well. And so, I'm very grateful to Penn Policy Center for putting on an event like this that is, I'm sure, educating a lot of people who need to carry that message. And I'm looking forward to talking to folks about maybe how we do that because, as other folks are highlighting, that complexity makes it very difficult to do, right? And it also can make it difficult for voters to keep this issue at the top of their list of things they care about. It can lose saliency pretty quickly. So I think that's our job to keep it at the top of voters' concerns so that when they're talking to their elected officials, as Rep. Izzy referenced, that's the thing that they're going to talk about. So once again, thanks so much for having me, and I believe I'm passing it to Jess.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to everyone for being on this call. Thanks, as always, to the Pennsylvania Policy Center for bringing folks together to talk about really important things that are impacting working Pennsylvanians every single day. My name is Jess Brittain. I'm the Communications Director for Action Together Northeastern Pennsylvania. So, as Jeff mentioned, that means our organization covers what is most commonly referred to as NEPA. So if you take a map of Pennsylvania, fold it into quarters, we cover the Northeast quadrant, which is about 19 counties. Action Together NEPA is a grassroots advocacy organization with members and chapters throughout all of those 19 counties. We work to build progressive infrastructure to reach people across our region. So in my before being professionally involved with Action Together NEPA, I also spent 20 years in the restaurant industry. So I have seen it all from people who are struggling to get by, those people who like their one time that they get to go out to eat is, a pretty big deal. People who are sitting and chatting with their friends about how difficult it is to pay their bills. And that was a few years ago. Things are definitely harder for folks now. So I am not a policy person. I'll be so honest with everyone. My eyes glaze over a little bit when we start getting into numbers and percentages and in all the wonkiness, which is why I'm also very grateful for the Pennsylvania Policy Center because they help me kind of fake it a little bit. But I'm an organizer, which means lots of conversations with working folks in our communities around the region. I want to do a little callback to an event that we did just the other day with some of the folks on this call. We had a rally for affordable energy in Scranton. And big props to For Our Future, to the conservation voters of Pennsylvania, to the Pennsylvania Policy Center, and to our great partners at Affordable Pennsylvania, because we wanted to get folks together and talk about, it's really hard to pay your soaring energy bills, right? So I took a little bit of an example from what we did that day. We happened to pull some stats on what it would cost to fill up the fuel tank of a helicopter of a certain congressman who does happen to represent that area. You can look that information up on your own, but what we found was that it costs about $430 pre our latest war, which apparently we can afford, even though we can't afford healthcare or public education, if you ask some of our representatives, right? $430 to fill up a helicopter. What we asked the folks in the crowd, what could your family do with $430? Here are some of the answers that we heard. It could pay for my insulin. It could buy me groceries for a month. I will note that that was a single person who lives alone. Anyone with more people to feed knows that that would not get you that far, right? It would almost pay this month's electricity bill. Shout out to Action Together community organizer Morgan Steiner, who's on this call and shared her story. It would pay down my medical bills. These are just a few examples of the things that working folks are worried about paying for. They're also just a few examples of the problems that we can solve by fixing Pennsylvania's upside down tax system. Looking at the working Pennsylvanians tax credit, looked at a few numbers from some of the counties in our region. I should say I'm zooming in here from Bloomsburg, in Columbia County, where there are potentially 4,617 beneficiaries of the working families tax credit. Those dollars that folks can get back equal one of those things that they're worried about paying for, right? The things that keep parents up at night, that keep folks struggling working 2 or 3 jobs. In the biggest county in Northeast PA, Luzerne County, 32,543 potential beneficiaries. It's a staggering number that could really be a game changer for some families. Even in the smallest county, Sullivan County, 382. That may seem like a tiny number, but in a county with a teeny tiny population, that is huge. It is our job as organizers to let folks know that programs like this are available, that tax credits like this are available, and who's responsible for making sure that those things are available to working folks just like all of us. People don't wake up one day and know these things, right? They don't wake up one day and just realize that these things are available to them and to their families. But what they do know is that our system is rigged against them and that it's not fair. They see the billionaires getting richer and richer. They see corporations showing record profits, right? They know that that's some nonsense and that it's unfair to working folks. They also know that they're struggling to make ends meet. So big talk about the economy and the if the stock market is doing well, things like that that just don't really equate to most folks' lived experiences every day. But what families do know is that even a little bit of help, a little bit of tax relief is breathing room that might be a game changer for them and for their families. So what do we do to get the word out? What do we do to have real conversations about these important issues? We organize around them. We make tax justice a part of the conversation every day. We hold events like the one that we did the other day where we talked about how much it costs to fly a helicopter, and we use the Pennsylvania Policy Center's giant inflatable cat, Mr. Riggs, who sits on a pile of money because the system is rigged, right? We hold fun events like one that's coming up on April Fool's Day with several partners on this call, where we're going to get a little silly and we're going to lead into the craziness of April Fool's Day, but we're going to talk about how folks are fooling the public and that it doesn't have to be the way that it is right now. We make sure to talk about this when our members are gathered together at our chapter meetings or at other events so that they can have conversations with their neighbors and other folks that they know in the community. We also make sure that it just becomes a natural thing to ask folks about. Hey, do you think this system is fair? Do you think it should be this way? Do we think we should maybe demand a little bit more from some of our leaders who are saying that there's nothing that they can do about it? Rep Izzy showed us in the very beginning of this call, there is something that our leaders can do about it. And he mentioned that it's really important to talk to your local representatives as well, because these tax issues impact us at every single level of our government. And it's our responsibility. If you're on this call, congratulations, you're a leader in your community. It's our responsibility to have those conversations and let folks know that we actually deserve better and better is possible. So I just want to thank again everybody who spoke before me. Thank you for all of the important work that you do. Thanks to the Pennsylvania Policy Center for having me again. Always appreciative of your partnership and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Rep. Izzy. I've been collecting some questions here in the chat that we will be posing to our panelists here momentarily. Again, we will be wrapping up by 2 p.m. One of the things we do, and one of the reasons why we call these twice a month meetings, policy action meetings, is that you just heard a lot about policy ideas and policies that can change things for Pennsylvanians. But, the question always is, so what? So what are we going to do about that? And that's the action part of these Zoom meetings that we do. We want to educate people about policies and then give folks an opportunity to be able to take action to make those a reality. And of course, to do that, nobody does this on their own. We have to be able to work together and to be on the same page and the same strategies. So I'm going to share really quickly here just some information. Oops, let me move this out of the way. Okay. I think folks can see my screen. We at the Pennsylvania Policy Center, along with our Pennsylvanians Together coalition partners, which include groups like For Our Future Pennsylvania and Action Together Northeast PA, have the campaign that we are rolling out. We are launching this publicly next week. We're going to show you here. This is on the Pennsylvania Policy Center website. I am pretty certain, I can't actually see it here, but I'm pretty sure my colleagues on our communications team are dropping some links in here so that you can access some of these. But this is our website. It brings out the information about the campaign. It's about making the wealthiest pay their fair share and making sure that the rest of us have the services and things that we need to have funded to have the kind of Pennsylvania that we all deserve. You can take a look at our website and take a look for more information about this. We have a host of resources here on the website, information about the fair share tax plan, combined reporting, a lot of different ideas. If you like to get down into the weeds on policy ideas and the details, we've got them here for you. And those can be very helpful when you're talking with legislators. But one of the things that I want to encourage everyone to do here today, before this meeting ends, probably before we even get to the questions, is we are encouraging folks to take action. And if you click down here on the action links on the page on our website, you'll see that we have a sign-on letter for legislators. So you could take this, or you could email this, or you could reach out to your legislator's office and ask them to sign on. Are they in support of this agenda? Moving on, I'm realizing some of my controls are blocked here by the on-screen stuff, so I'll just have to do this the old-fashioned way. Click on the link. We are also inviting organizations like Guess Who, For Our Future, Action Together Northeast PA, and a host of others to sign on as organizations that are part of this growing movement for tax justice, fairness, and for affordability for all Pennsylvanians. I'm going to show you one more thing here, and this is the one that I think everyone can do right now before we leave this meeting. I want to see these numbers go up on actions for this, but it is our petition. And it is a petition that we are asking folks to sign. We will be delivering these to your state senators and state representatives. And also, we are asking for email information and your zip code so that we know where in the state you are, so that we have key opportunities to put pressure on certain legislators. We can reach out to you, and we can reach out to you with your email address. I would encourage everybody to just take a moment here before we wrap up the meeting and please sign the petition. I'm going to go back to the main page here. Again, this is on the Pennsylvania Policy Center website. It's part of our Pennsylvanians Together campaign, and it's for our Commonwealth. And I mentioned that we're rolling this out and announcing this publicly next week. A number of my colleagues, a number of folks who are here in the Zoom meeting today, folks you heard from, will be joining us in Harrisburg on Tuesday morning. We will be in the Capitol Rotunda at 11 a.m., and we will be announcing and talking about the need for tax justice and tax fairness in Pennsylvania. We will unveil the For Our Commonwealth campaign and talk about some of the policies that are there. We will have a number of legislators with us. Some of the real champions for working Pennsylvanians will be with us at the Capitol on Tuesday at 11 a.m. I invite all of you, if you are in the area or if you're able to make it from a little bit farther distance, please join us for this press conference that we'll be doing at 11 a.m. announcing the Pennsylvanians Together for Our Commonwealth campaign. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will zip over here now to some questions. Looking to make sure I saw anything in the chat here. Let me start with the first couple questions that we got for our panelists. I'm going to try to take these somewhat in the order that they were submitted if possible, and if I can combine a few, we'll do that. First question comes from our friend Gloria, asking about the fair share tax plan, and I think maybe more specifically it was about the working Pennsylvanians tax credit. The question Gloria has does not apply to retired people. Is that the question there? I don't know if anybody has an answer to that regarding the working Pennsylvanians tax credit, but thought I'd put it out there for our panelists. I'm going to take a stab and I'm going to say, if you are retired and if you do your tax preparation and if you are able to claim the federal earned income tax credit, and then you would be able to claim the working Pennsylvanians tax credit. I don't know about everybody's individual tax history and what some of the issues are, but I can tell you that this functions in tandem with and parallels the federal earned income tax credit. So talk with your accountant or whatever means you're using to get your taxes filed. I'm going to move on to another question we have here. This one is for Rep. Izzy. This is from our friend RM, who first says, thank you, Rep. Smith-Waddell, for your previous support of House Bill 2016, introduced by Rep. Fiedler, to repeal the state's uniformity clause. Are you able to provide any update on its status in the General Assembly? For instance, is there a similar bill introduced in this session? What has been the greatest rhetorical opposition to it so far? So that's for Rep. Izzy. You're welcome to take a stab at answering that.
Happy to. So my understanding is we don't have a reintroduction of that this session. Representative Fiedler, I should say Chair Fiedler, now has introduced two bills on taxation justice, really developing revenue. Those are closing the Delaware loophole. I'll talk for a second about what that means. Essentially, as it stands right now, because we don't have combined reporting in the Commonwealth, a corporation can shift its profits to a subsidiary based in Delaware, thereby claiming that they earned no profits in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that year, and totally skate on paying even the limited amount that we ask of them in corporate net income tax. So one of the bills that she's working on very hard is to close that loophole, and the other is digital ad revenue, where these multi-billion-dollar corporations, your Metas, your Alphabet, that's Google, are placing digital ads to Pennsylvanians. We're asking them, or the legislation would require them to put to deliver some of that back to the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in the form of taxation. My imagination is we'll see another piece of legislation on the uniformity clause before the session is out, but I will say the biggest rhetorical opposition is our colleagues who oppose it usually just say something as simple as, well, it's fair. Everyone pays the same percentage of their taxes. And because that's neat and can fit on a bumper sticker and is already the status quo, I will say a lot of folks don't put more effort into developing more incisive rhetoric than that, in part because they don't have to, right? Like the Jeff Yasses of the world and the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce and et cetera, put a lot of money into making sure that legislators don't overturn the uniformity clause, just in terms of the environment that we're working in.
Thanks so much, Rep. Izzy, for that thorough answer, and thank you also for the question that we got submitted in the chat. We're going to get to a few more here. We have a few minutes for some extra time to get some questions in. A question from Craig is, how does the Fair Share tax plan affect retirees for IRA distributions and pension distributions? I'm thinking, Erin, you probably are pretty familiar with that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. Before we get to that, I did also want to tag on to what Rep. Izzy had responded in response to the previous question as well. I do want to highlight for those that aren't familiar, the Pennsylvania constitutional amendment process is very lengthy. It is much more lengthy than the original or the normal legislative process, right? So to amend the Constitution, you have to pass identical legislation through two consecutive 2-year legislative sessions, and then you have to get approval from the voters. So just wanted to highlight that it's very frequently brought up, like, why don't we just amend the Constitution? Unfortunately, that would take a very long time, but that by no means means that we are not trying. As for the retirement income question, so Pennsylvania does not tax Social Security benefits. They do not tax pensions or retirement income. So most retirees would see either no change to their tax responsibility, or they would see a tax cut. The only cases in which retirees would likely see an increase to their taxes is if they had around $250,000 in investment income or anywhere north of that. So for the vast majority of retired Pennsylvanians, they would see either no change to their taxes or a tax cut.
Thanks so much for explaining that, Erin. Really appreciate appreciate you also adding and building off of Rep. Izzy's answer. Looking ahead here, I've got a few other questions from our friend Robert up in the Lehigh Valley. Can individual counties or municipalities levy income taxes on unearned income, such as interest, dividends, and capital gains? This is a pretty good policy wonk question. I'll give our panelists an opportunity to take a stab at that if they'd like.
I will say it's there's no straight answer to that. I think yes, specific localities can levy taxes on unearned income, but I think in Pennsylvania, most local governments are restricted to taxing only earned income. So Philadelphia, for example, imposes a school income tax on unearned income, but I think it really varies by municipality. And just in general, in speaking with issues about the differences between what the state is doing and localities, we really often run into preemption issues. I'm not sure how much that applies here, but I would say generally state tax law supersedes local tax law in a lot of senses, but certainly not an expert on that. And that is a very good question.
We'll go to Rep. Izzy. I think he'd like to comment as well.
Yeah. Just coming from, and thank you, Erin. Just coming from a local government background and having tried to do this for the city of Lancaster, the general principle is that municipalities in the Commonwealth, other than the city of the first class, are not authorized to tax unearned income. We have property taxes, we have the EIT, and then we're allowed to levy taxes on licensing, certain kinds of transaction. But the way that Pennsylvania is what's called a Dillon rule state, which means that the courts typically say that if the state hasn't explicitly said somewhere in the law that a municipality can levy a particular tax or a particular genre of tax, that they can't, and that leaves municipalities doing a lot of reading between the lines. The short answer to your question, however, is unless you live in Philly, probably not.
Yes, that cities of the first class rule, which means Philadelphia when they have this. Thank you so much, Rep. Izzy. That really helped to add some additional context to that. We have a question here from a friend and colleague here in the Philadelphia area doing some work on banking issues, public banking, fantastic work. Our friend Nicole asks, how much does the fair share tax plan as proposed impact retirees on taxes and pension, IRA, passive income for those people? I think we've touched on some of that. I don't know if anybody wanted to add any more to that. Okay, I'm going to take one last look here in the chat. We are down to our last couple of minutes. We have a question from our friend Alyssa, and I think this will be the last question that we have time for here, and this is for Rep. Izzy. What is the feel out in Lancaster County about all of Trump's spending and price surges? Because that area is pretty reddish, right?
Hi, Alyssa. Thank you, Jeff. I was actually just in the midst of typing an answer. Uh, Two things real quick. This is a very or has historically been a very red county. Yes, I think it's starting to grate on people, even Republicans, when they're seeing these increases in gas prices, increases in food prices, and a tax on the things that actually make things work here in Lancaster County. So we have a very agricultural county, and the reality of that is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That means immigrant labor. We have a county that's very reliant on, pardon me, road transportation. So those gas prices hit individuals, households, farmers, and business owners hard. So we're starting to see, I mean, like some Republicans are just like, some folks are just in that cult of personality. But, we're talking to a lot of working class folks who are feeling more and more betrayed by that spending, which I tell everybody that is an opportunity for those of us who believe in economic justice to start having conversations with people on their terms, and that's worked for us here in Lancaster County. So for example, like the governor's probably going to win the county this year. We might even pick up an extra state house seat. It really all depends on the ability of Democrats to take advantage of the cracks in the foundation by addressing economic issues and affordability directly. Like, I think if we talk about that, we'll have a successful year. And if we deliver on it, even better. But if not, anyway, thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you so much, Rep. Izzy, and thank you, Alyssa, for the question. We are at the end of our time. I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much, Rep. Izzy. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jess. Thank you to Felicity and the rest of the PA Policy Center team, my colleagues Adrian, Laura, Kirsten, who have been so helpful with today's meeting. We will be back 2 weeks from today, same time. You'll need to register for that. We're going to be dropping some of that here in the chat. But 2 weeks from today, we will be back. It will be April 2nd at 1 o'clock. We will be looking some more at tax justice, tax fairness. This time, we're going to be looking at things that can happen at the federal level and ways that we can take action together to insist that tax fairness not just be a priority for Pennsylvania, but for all Americans. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.